Before the next episode of X Job Downloaded starts, I have a big favour to ask. If you've enjoyed any of our episodes so far, please can you click on the follow button on your platform. I'm on Apple, Spotify, Google, Amazon and YouTube. It costs nothing to follow, but makes a real difference to me as a podcast producer. Thank you. This interview is being tape recorded. My name is Paul Maleary and this is X Job Downloaded. And today I'm going to interview Scott Methven. Have I pronounced that correctly?
You have indeed, Paul, yes.
Well, I'm getting good at this because I'm talking to people from all over the place and pronunciation of surnames is really important. Now, we first met or spoke to each other some time ago when it was a veteran's 100th birthday, and you'll be pleased to know that he's 102. He hasn't been too well, but he's still kicking along, mate. So, and I'm really grateful for your support on that. But where did it all start for Scott? Where were you born, and how did you get to where you are now?
So I'm from a small village. I'll test your names here. A small village called Gargunnock.
Gargunnock.
It's like something you go to the doctor with, isn't it? Those are the Gargunnocks. So it was a small place called Gargunnock, which is just outside Stirling. So as the crow flies, if you ever head up to Stirling, and you're heading north, you'll see Stirling Castle, and it's kind of out to the front of Stirling Castle. So sort of going over towards sort of the Erskine Bridge Road, and heading out towards Kippen. So that's where I grew up. In a small village there. It was a one pub, one school place, really, really small. And I learned to play the pipes. I was a keen football player. That was always your focus, isn't it? It's always football or sports.
Yeah.
And then I did a wee bit of rugby, but the school strikes were on in the 80s, so that kiboshed that. And my two older brothers, they both played the chanter, which is the thing you go on to before the pipes.
Right.
So it's not as loud and as unpleasant as the bagpipes.
So, but it's literally a pipe, isn't it? Yeah. So it's like it's a very extended. Well, I wouldn't even call it a recorder, but it is the main part that you blow into.
Aye. So it's all it is if you imagine a bagpiper and the bit that he moves his hands. That's what it is. It's like, because you get a bagpipe chanter. And effectively, what it is a smaller version of how you would play your tunes. And with bagpipes, what you've got to kind of think about is just see it as like a little mini band. So you've got the main singer is your fingers, that's your Tina Turner, and then your backing vocalists dancing away. That's your wee three things that lie in your shoulder.
Brilliant.
So that's what they are. So what you've got the melody being played by your fingers. And the harmony should be perfectly in balance with what you're playing, and you should be able to tune them into each other. And Paul always say, someone always said to me, bagpipers, I don't like them. I don't like the sound of the pipes. Well, see if they sound wrong, then it's a bad bagpiper you're listening to.
Yeah,
it should be pleasant. It can be loud, but it should still be pleasant.
I love the bagpipes. When President Obama was over. I think it's 2011, we were doing some work and I stayed at Wellington Barracks and the guys were getting ready for the birthday parade. Mm-hmm. Oh, mate, to be woken up at 6 o'clock in the morning by the pipers practicing out on the stairwells, it was absolutely stunning. I felt very privileged to hear that. Wellington Barracks, and it's a different type of place, but to have it filled with that sound is superb.
Yeah, actually, I was lucky enough when President Obama came over to do his final sort of wave off. I was lucky enough to be. I was in Windsor Castle, and it was a great crack. I mean, it was they came across, and it was really funny actually because I was looking after the Secret Service team, and just showing them about, nothing top secret, showing them all these places, and a few that the British police had said, watch the Irish embassy thing, because they got their car, the Beast as they call it, stuck at the Irish Embassy, and it's good watching. So
it is good watching.
The police like to rib each other, don't they? So the special branch guys are like, make sure you mention it. I says, right, I will do. So I was winding them up because I was saying in Windsor Castle, I was showing them, and as you come up the back, it's got, obviously, you've got little tunnels underneath everywhere, as any castle would have. And I said, oh, this is hollow underneath, and they're starting to get right up worried and space and everything, saying, oh, do you think it'll collapse? And I swear this is the truth. One of the police officers, one of the special branch Americans, said, I mean, how old is Windsor Castle? Is it quite old? I says, aye, it's really, really old, like. And then they said, well, how old? I said, well, what? I said, I don't know. And I had to go and look it up, and it was something ridiculous. Like, there'd been people on the Windsor Castle site from something like, and I'm wrong with my history, but it was like 20 AD or something that they've tracked it all the way back, haven't they?
Yeah.
So it's been there forever. And this guy couldn't get his head around it. And it was really funny. And I walked round, and he said, do you see the Queen much? I wouldn't put an American accent on because it's not that good. And he said, do you see the Queen much? And I looked up, and the Queen was looking out, and I looked up, and I don't know what else to do when the Queen's looking at you. So I just wave, because I always do that. So I waves up at the Queen, and they all looked up, and they had no idea what to do. I says, there's the Queen there. And I told them, you better wave. And it was brilliant. That's the thing. But to actually answer your question, where I started, it was, just at school. I got taught through the local council, up here. They teach bagpipes the same as you would piano, and they obviously teach all those instruments as well.
Yeah.
But I just started doing that, and it was, I'll be honest, it was more of a war of attrition. I suppose it's like any instrument that I think every week I was the most reluctant piper ever. I hated practicing. I just wanted to go and play football. And really, if it wasn't for the dedication, probably as much as my mother, as my brothers, that helped me kept playing, and just kept going through it. And then it was quite a difficult time when I was younger, and I thought, it was one area that I thoroughly actually enjoyed. Now I look back in it, I enjoyed it.
So when you joined the army, you've done your schooling, but when you've joined the army, did you join as a piper, or was that a secondary skill, if you like?
Well, Paul, the thing is, I went to the recruiting office, and please, no one give me any abuse for me about to say this, but I always wanted to join the police. That's really what I wanted to do. So I wasn't academic at all. As a lot of us.
What are you trying to say about the police?
Well, that's why I couldn't join. And I'm not tall. I'm only 5'6". So at the time it was still, I don't know if it's the same in England, but you had to be like
5'8" plus, or 5'10" and a quarter, I think it was when I joined. Yeah, so
5'8". Aye, that sounds about right. And I went into the recruiting office, and I said, look, I was at the recruiting office, I think, every day from when I was 15, desperate to go, That's all I wanted to do. I had no interest in school whatsoever. Did play football, at school, but that was it. It was just sports, PE department, that's where I went, and I played the pipes. That was pretty much Scott Methven at that point. So then I went to the recruiting office, and I wanted to join the military police. Oh,
good for you.
And of course, the recruiting office, the boys in there were the local regiment, which was the 1st Battalion, the Argyll and Sutherland Highlanders.
Yep.
And they told me, and I think it was a lie, they said, oh, I'm sorry, there's no room. I had filled out the questionnaire, and I think that's what it was, and I'd they put hobbies. So I put down the hobbies, and I put bagpipes. And then it came back through and said, I'm really sorry. I'm afraid we don't have any spaces in the military police. But if you want to join the army, we've got spaces in the 1st Battalion, your local regiment, the 1st Battalion, the Argyll and Sutherland Highlanders, and they're looking for pipers. So I didn't join the army as a piper. I joined obviously as an infantry soldier. And it's the same as the corps of drums in the English battalions. You join as a soldier. Music in the cheap, I used to like to call it. It's like you get two for the price of one.
Yeah.
And then I went away to. I joined the military in November 1989. I went to my training January the 15th, or no, January 8th, I think, a Junior Infantry Battalion, Euston, in 1990, down by Newcastle.
Excellent. And did you have to not retrain, that's the wrong word, because you've got, is it Nether Hall down in London? Once you've got the pipes, you didn't have to go off to a music school, and because you already played.
So we don't go to Nether Hall. We're nothing to do with them because they're full-time musicians.
Right.
That's their gig.
Right.
And obviously we are infantry soldiers. So
yes.
I would do my 52 weeks training down in juniors, and I always remember it was a bit surreal, because if you think of the time, we finished our training. It was the 15th of December,
right,
1990, and everyone used to march in to get their postings.
Yeah.
And I was really unusual cohort of young soldiers who, the Gulf, obviously the Desert Storm was just kicking off.
Yes.
And everybody went in and everybody came out, and you would salute the officer, stand at the table, and they would go through the wee sort of notions of where you were getting posted to. And at the time, the Scottish Division, as it was back then, the Royal Scots, I think, were in Verl in Germany. The Argyll and Southern Highlanders were in Minden. The Royal Highland Fusiliers were in Cambridge. And what we found was all my friends who were Royal Scots, for example, too young to go to Germany, went to the 1st Battalion RHF, Royal Highland Fusiliers in Cambridge, and then deployed to Afghanistan.
Wow.
To Iraq.
Yeah.
For Desert Storm, or Q8, should I say.
Yeah, yeah.
And that was, everybody walked in and everybody was told, Q8, Q8, Q8. And one of the boys came out before I went, and they went, where's Q8? Right? Nobody knew.
No.
We were young.
No,
16-year-old
exactly.
boys. Are just turned 17. So that was a really kind of surreal time. So that was good though.
Fantastic. And so where did you go to Cambridge, or where were you?
So what happened was, to answer your question, I ended up I was going to be going to the King's Own Scottish Borderers, and they were based in Edinburgh.
Right.
But a few of my friends went, but because I played the pipes, they decided, and the battalion was deploying to Q8 as well. I went to the Army School of Piping and Highland Drumming up in Edinburgh, and it was out at Glencorse Barracks, out by Pennycook at the time. So the old Scottish Division was still, Scottish and King's Division was still being run up there with the training.
Yeah, I mean, that must have been absolutely amazing, though, to be with all those like-minded people, and you could just practice to your heart's content, I assume. It
was quite, if I remember rightly, it was quite dysfunctional, actually, to be honest, because there were not a set period that you would be there for. Unlike now, you go there and it's fairly, like any course, fairly rigid. But it was different at the piping school because they held you there till they decided you were good enough to go.
Right.
So I was there for about 6 or 7 months, and if I'm honest, I think some of it would be they like to keep a few plain pipers to do some of the jobs, some of the gigs that are there. And when I say gigs, I mean things like remembrance days, or they needed pipers to play at different funerals and what have you.
Yeah.
And that's what I found myself doing. Actually, I did. As a young piper, only 17 years old, I had to go on a few soldiers that died during the Gulf War.
Oh, did you?
I found myself doing that, and that was a right big dose of reality as a young 17-year-old soldier. Albeit I hadn't went to war, and a lot of my friends had went. I got the unfortunate, or the privilege, should I say, to go and give somebody their final send off, and the realism of what actually the army and the war's really like.
Yeah. Yeah, it's very sobering because it all sounds very exotic, doesn't it? I interviewed Andy Merry, and he's a beefeater now at the Tower, and he was telling us some of the things that they did, and the reality versus the TV is not always as good. It's a tough old life. But so you've done your time in Edinburgh. Did you get deployed overseas?
No, at that point, I then joined the 1st Battalion, the Argyll Southern Highlanders, up in over in Minden in Germany.
Right.
And I was there for a few years, and then what happened was we only sent I think I'd just missed the Northern Ireland tour in 1990. They were in Goodwood, and then I was in Germany, and we were just really, really busy. Because we were mechanised with the old 432s.
Right.
So they didn't go far. and we always went away over to Germany doing Medman 7, I think that was in 1991. And then it was back to the UK. We were unfortunate enough to be put into the old junior battalion down at Shorncliffe.
I know Shorncliffe Barracks.
So it was mothballed until we went into it.
Oh, right.
And we went in, and it was an absolute, it was a disgrace. That's the only words you can really use.
I went there in '88 for the P&O sailors strike, and we were billeted there. All these coppers, we had all our right vans and what have you, and it was a dump then. I mean, it was a dump. The showers were, it was absolutely vile. So if they hadn't done them up and you've gone back a couple of years later, they must have been even worse.
Well, it was 1993, so they hadn't done anything.
No.
At all, nothing. And we were in there for a couple of years, and then we got bounced up to Edinburgh, and Redford Barracks had just been renovated. But actually, when we were in Folkestone, it was I did my first tour of Northern Ireland from there, and really that was the crux of what the 1st Battalion there, Guyana Southern Highlanders, we always just got brought into it. So it was a 6 months operational tour, West Belfast.
Oh, nice.
I was based at North Howard Street Mill, and also we would work from there because we put the pipes and drums as a formed platoon, and we worked as the battalion's operational reserve.
Right.
And I seem to always have taken over places I go, whether it be Afghanistan, wherever. It always seemed to be the Royal Marines I always used to take over from, and we had taken over from the Royal Marines, and it was good. It was good fun. But they had 2 operational reserves. But typically, our battalion were tasking our platoon the same as what they were 2 platoons.
Right.
It was hard going. It was good. Absolutely loved it. Quite surreal, I think, even more so than if a conventional war like Afghanistan or what have you. I think what's different about that, Paul, is that you were policing. I think what was quite surreal for me as a young 18 or 19-year-old by this point, just patrolling around the streets with the police, serving warrants and all this sort of, helping them serve warrants, do all that sort of things, and it was quite an insight. And quite scary at times.
Oh yeah,
but really, really rewarding, to be honest.
I played hockey out there, and they took us on patrol, and we went into the Catholic and the Protestant side, and we stopped to look at the murals because the murals are amazing, aren't they? The artwork that goes on, and we're there, and there's these kids, 8 and 9-year-olds throwing half bricks and stones at the armoured vehicles that we're in. I mean, it's quite unnerving, really.
Yeah. Well, we did that tour, and it was a busy tour, but we didn't lose anyone on the tour, which is, and I think, to be honest, and if I am honest, I think being a Scottish battalion, we have that unique bond.
Oh, it's the Celts.
We understand the sectarians a lot clearer.
Oh. Well, you've got it in Glasgow, mate. I mean, it's the Rangers Celtic side. If the first thing you say to someone from Glasgow, are you green or blue, and then you know which way the conversation's going.
Well, mobile phones had just kind of started becoming commonplace in sort of 93, 94, if I remember rightly, and it was funny. And I remember we actually got a collusion brief, and we were standing, and of course half the company. So you're talking about 100, it was a full formed company, so about 100, 120 guys, and we're all standing, and the company commander, the major, comes out and says, right, you make sure that you're not taking sides, you're being impartial and what have you. I remember it was short sleeve order, and half the company were standing with Celtic tattoos all up and down their arms, the other half with God in Ulster. This is without a word of a lie. And someone's mobile phone went, and it was the sash that was played. Sash, my father was going out. I was just like, couldn't make that up. And it was great, you know. It was, but the guys knew what it was about. And as you say, some of these boys have been brought up, you know, exactly the same way as Northern Ireland, so we understood it, which didn't always go in our favour, I must admit. But we knew how to sort of, I think, treat people fairly, and that's really the key.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, my family, with the surname that I've got, I've got a huge family in Galway, so you know we're green on that side, you know, and it is what it is, mate. You know, I'm just saddened that Northern Ireland seems to be kicking off again, although it's being suppressed by the press. But it's an interesting, and it's a beautiful country that's spoilt by politics. Whatever side of the fence, it's just ruined. And it's not about the religion side. It's about money making now. You know, it's the organised crime groups that are involved over there, whether it be the taxis or the fruit machines or whatever it is. We all know. The beauty is that the cops know who they're looking at. Yeah,
absolutely, aye.
But it's the level of violence.
Aye. Yeah, I was quite lucky as well, though, because I had that added extra thing of being a piper.
Yes.
So, and we were there during remember there were a ceasefire night 4.
Yeah.
Quite a big. That was the first kind of ceasefire, I think, since 1979. Roughly about then. So we were then soft posture.
Yeah.
And so it was the Glengarries went on, and you know the guys put the Glengarries on, and rather uniquely. So, you know, the Argyll and Southern Highlanders would wear red and white dice.
Yes.
They stand out.
Very smart.
They don't have the black dice in through the middle. So it's quite unique. And I would wear a black Glengarry because I was a piper.
Oh, right.
So it was a wee bit unique. And it was quite funny, actually, because, and I think every boy in the Argyll and Southern Highlanders at 1st Battalion would claim to be in this video. But when we were there in 94, the Cranberries filmed Zombie.
Oh, right.
And they came out and patrol with us, and they stayed with us for a few days. And we were all in the video of Zombie, and it was the 1st Battalion walking round, and that was in wasn't it Turf Lodge? It was Ballymurphy area, and that's where they filmed it. And they filmed it under the guise of a public relations video or what have you. Hadn't told the MOD, good old MOD. Due diligence there, and it was a video, and we're, you know, there are loads of members of the Argylls.
Are you in it?
In that video?
You in it?
Yeah, I'm in it. I would always claim to be in it, So, because one of my friends who was in my brick, as you used to call it, in my team, he's in it, and you can see him a mile off because he never smiled ever.
Brilliant. I'll have a look at that later.
I need to look at it. It's brilliant. And we, you know, playing the pipes in Northern Ireland, that broke down barriers as well, because I had the black Glengarry on. People would obviously question you, why are you wearing a black Glengarry? I play the bagpipes. Oh, my uncle played the bagpipes. You know, you would be, you know, all these villages, you might maybe have a truck coming from a certain village, Balnahinch, for example.
Yeah.
Right? And Balnahinch used to have a really good pipe band. So I would say, oh, do you know so-and-so for Balnahinch pipe band? And they're like, I do, aye. And again, it was just breaking down those barriers, and you putting a human face to the people you're talking to.
Yeah.
You'll understand that is when you had your helmet on, you weren't seen as a real person. But as soon as you put your headdress on, they could see your eyes. You know, they weren't as intimidated.
Yeah.
And I think that was a really good sort of breaking down the barriers. You know.
How long were you out in Northern Ireland for then?
So we did that operational tour, and they said that would be us for a wee while, for a couple of years. The following year, but 6 months later, they put us on a 2 years ARB. So we went straight into 2 years, I think it was ARB, then PRB. So we were 4 years straight.
Wow.
From Edinburgh. And I can't remember what way around it was. It was either Permanent Rulement Battalion, which was the Belfast side.
Yeah.
And then we flipped to ARB, which was the Armagh Rulement Battalion. So I think it was Armagh, then it was the Belfast. And it was 2 years. So the way we worked it was we were based in Edinburgh. We'd have a company out on ops for 6 weeks, company back doing training, company, getting leave and courses and stuff.
Right.
And we would rotate that for 2 years, non-stop.
Wow.
And obviously you have the company back in Edinburgh, they were also on QRF. So literally they would, send Sea Kings over, helicopters right on the square at Redford Barracks, take them right over to the Prestwick, get sorted out and right over Northern Ireland.
Wow.
I remember, and it was quite weird, you'd be sitting getting all your radios and stuff, and then deploying straight away, sometimes just flying straight over, go to the Edinburgh airport, if that was the case, depends what they had in the way of transport. Heli Bedford wouldn't work. But so they would turn around and get us over to Belfast, and you would be sitting at the airport, bombing up your mags, and then literally getting taken for Chinook, South Armagh, deployed out, straight over for whatever op they needed us for, and we were involved in some quite tasty sort of high profile stuff.
Yeah.
It's like snipers and all that we caught, and we were just doing the cordon and stuff, and it was really, really, really interesting stuff. We lost a few guys when we were out there as well, mostly due to, one was a road traffic accident. It was a terrible, terrible thing, and at the time we used to have the hops, everybody would jump in and try and deceive the people watching us, the dickers, anybody we think's watching them. So you would put a ridiculous amount of soldiers and policemen in the back of these Land Rovers and drive round and then kick guys out and just try and sort of hoodwink the baddies. And sadly, on one of the occasions down in South Armagh, the first Land Rover pulled out. The second one tried to follow, got hit with an Arctic in the side, and a few of the guys were killed, and it was devastating. And I think in some ways it wasn't my company. I'm sure it was Bravo Company, and that was kind of harder to take, because it's not through fighting. It's I always think that's sometimes harder to comprehend sometimes than actually getting killed in the job that you're trained to do, if that makes sense.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I do understand what you're saying. I lost a few mates out in Iraq, and they were all military policemen, and it's it's a terrible time. But it's the, like you say, they were in battle. They're having a fight. When you're killed in a road traffic collision, that's not what you're there for, is it? It's not what you're training for. How did they receive that though within the battalion? Because for someone to get killed in service is quite a big deal, isn't it? It is a big deal for the people left behind.
I think it kind of goes back to when I mentioned earlier about my first reality check of the army when I went and played the pipes for someone that had came back from Desert Storm and had died. It was that kind of reality check again for everyone that this isn't a mundane job. I know now people sit there and criticise or probably the Afghan veterans in Iraq kind of maybe look down on the guys that were in Northern Ireland and doing the job there because they don't see it as the same sort of fight. But I think they need to understand it was a different kind of battle.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I think to be honest, and this is my own point of view, is that the personal skills of people that operate in Northern Ireland was so high.
Yeah.
So it was a different kind of army. It was, I'm going to say, it was more disciplined. I don't mean that in any disrespect to any following campaigns, but it was, these guys were top operators.
Oh yeah.
I can say that some of the finest soldiers I've ever served with were Northern Ireland guys.
Yeah.
Because they were so switched on, and they understood atmospherics. They understood things that were going on. Whereas I felt sometimes, and I think it might just be a generational thing as well, is that the young team, as I call them, that I went to battle with recently, you had to kind of almost coax them through. Look, can you see this is happening?
But I think the other thing is because it's you're working within with British nationals in Northern Ireland. I don't think people realise the size. Northern Ireland isn't big, and you're working in such close proximity to both sides that at any point, either one of them, it can go horribly wrong, and therefore you've got to have your wits about you. Whereas, and I've never been in a battle like that, but from my perspective, I say, if you're sitting in Q8 or wherever, and you're going through the front door of an insurgent, you know that you're battling against an insurgent. But when you've got the local populace and everybody looks the same, everyone's wearing the same, you've really got to have your wits about you.
Well, actually, it's funny you kind of say that, because that's made me really remember. I mean, we were pretty much Northern Ireland from 1994. And if you think, it was 1990 operational tour, 1994 back, and then that was the 1st Battalion, the Argyll and Southern Highlanders, back in Northern Ireland. Right the way through to sort of 2000, and then we thought, we'll get a break. No, the sent us then to Belfast. So we were there. And what happened was, in that sort of interim period, was we were one of the battalions involved in Drumcree.
Oh, okay, yeah.
And that was a game changer. I've never seen anything like that in my life. Our battalion, ended up rewriting actually all the riot doctrine because of that, and it had to all change because it was just kind of out of date. And it was again that was a reality check. I've used that word a couple of times, but I use it consciously, because what we had some of the home service during the day, because obviously they worked just 9 to 5.
Yeah.
On the baseline with us, and then at night they were going to the other side and rioting against us. And there were even a guy that I believe was arrested because he had fired a pipe bomb at us, and he had been standing with us at our side. So and that was a good reminder for a lot of young guys that, I know you're saying that you've got your God and Ulster tattoos in your arms, right? But they're not your friends. Remember that.
Exactly.
Right? And that was just amazing. And I've never seen that men work as hard as what they did there. And, thankless task. Absolutely thankless. You couldn't win. And then I just go forward a couple of years, and I think when we went to the battalion, when the battalion was based in Belfast for 2 years, it was our battalion that had to deal with Church of the Holy Cross.
Yes.
Which was absolutely horrendous. I mean, anybody that puts their children through that, I do totally respect your right to walk down a street.
Yeah.
But I wouldn't allow my child to be hit with water balloons full of urine.
Oh.
And it was all for the publicity.
Yeah.
That's the Sinn Féin pushing that. And I don't defend one side or the other, just to be clear.
No.
Because at the same time, it shouldn't have been happening in the first place, because it's children we're talking about. But they were, what they didn't do was they were another, obviously, gate to get into the school, and that was a safe gate. But it was they were insistent on coming down this way through the Presbyterian sort of road, and made a point of just taking everything that was thrown at them, literally. And the jocks were the guys, try to defend these children. And I think that was a terrible thing,
Yeah.
But as you say, I absolutely love Northern Ireland. Just a wonderful place to albeit all the violence and what have you. But what a fantastic place to serve. I had as much fun as tragedy. Oh
yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's a lovely place. And going back to what you're saying, principle is the worst thing that you can have sometimes, because a lawyer will make thousands of pounds out of somebody's. It's a point of principle, and this is what happens when it's a principle. I should be able to walk my kids through. Yeah, I get that, but actually, you're putting your kids and everybody else at risk. Mm-hmm. And it's a bit of a selfish thing. So, how did you progress in the army?
So, in 1994, I got promoted to Lance Corporal, and then from there, I would do soldier courses in tandem with piping courses. Right. So you've got to do both. You've got to be a competent soldier. All my friends will say I'm totally incompetent. That's a typical military thing, isn't it? And then And then about 1998, I got promoted to corporal. And I was about 24 or something, but by that time, 24, 25. I went down to Brecon. I always remember my instructor was in the SAS, and I was like, oh no. Because, you know, I was probably the most reluctant soldier you'll ever get. I loved it. I loved the idea of it. But actually, the hard work is really quite hard. So did you go to the depot at Brecon then, at Crickhowell? No, Brecon. At the army training camp. Yeah. Well, my mum's cousin was the MO there, and when I was a kid, we used to run riot. They lived. There's a bungalow. As you go through the main gate, up on the left hand side, there's a bungalow, and he lived there. He was a colonel, and infantry battle school there. So and it was great. And when I was there, it was different from what it's like now. Now I sound like an old soldier when I say that. Yeah. And the reason it was different is because you had to double everywhere. No one was allowed to walk. Oh, wow. There were no walking. You had to run everywhere. That was it. And quite amazing, actually. And, of course, my instructor was in the SAS. And I always remember I sat down and he said, you're going to be my tool to make me fit because I'm going back to my regiment. And I was like, oh, no. Oh, no. It was brilliant because the guy was no nonsense. Yeah. Just right down the line, cracking soldier, cracking guy, and that was it. And, on with it. And it was a case of common sense. You know, it wasn't a job's worth. It was just a good guy, and I think we all responded to that because we were definitely one of the best sections, if not the best. We came first for the runs and stuff like that, and that was the key because that's what he said. No, you're not coming. Do not come second. Do not come second. So we just made sure we were at the front of everything, and it was good, really, really good. And then from there, I had a kind of change of heart. I wanted to leave the army. Right. So I'd done a couple more years. We were just in Edinburgh, and we had moved to Belfast, into Palace Barracks, and I just decided, I'm hitting that 27. I'm single. I would like to leave the army. So I think it was 2002. And I decided, look, I love the army. No issues with it whatsoever. I just want to leave because I want to see what real life is like. Yeah. And I remember going into my commanding officer and he said, right, here we go. Right, why do you want to leave? I said, well, sir, I want to leave because I want to see what life's like outside the army. Well, you don't hate the army? I said, I love the army. And I'm very thankful for everything it's provided me. But I'm 27. So... And we're stuck in Belfast, so it's unlikely I'm going to really want to meet a woman here, right? And know that there are no lots of beautiful women in Northern Ireland. Yes, but I understand the sentiment. But it wasn't that. So I decided, no, I'm going to leave. So I decided to leave, terminated. Away I went, and I ended up. I'd done all my courses for the rigs, all the rope access stuff. And, I'd done all the non-destructive testing. Exams and stuff, level 2 I did, if I remember rightly, and so I did all that, and then there were a big downsizing of the rigs, and I had applied to the prison service as a fallback, and that was my mum. Always listen to your mum, doesn't matter how old you are. So I had applied to that as a maybe because the money was rubbish, and so I was like, right, okay, so I ended up going to work in the prison service because they downsized the rigs. So I was in the Scottish prison service, and they put me, because I'm in Stirling, just outside Stirling, they put me to a female prison, which was HMP Cornton Vale, or HMP YOI, Young Offenders Institution, Cornton Vale. Is that where all the controversy is at the moment? Indeed it is, aye. Oh, yeah. That's worked out well, hasn't it? Well, do you know, I was actually really quite naive. I actually thought women were all clean. That changed my mind. And we all think we've had quite a hard upbringing, I think. So, we always think, it was a difficult upbringing. But I must admit, some of the tragic people in prison. Oh, they are tragic as well. By the grace of God, to be perfectly honest, is that I think that we can all make wrong choices. I remember one young lady in particular, and she was a nice enough lassie, and she said she was only like 19, or she might be younger than that actually, because she was a student nurse, I always remember. And she'd been out drinking, and her boyfriend had been seeing someone else. She found out. She was drunk. She ran up to the girl who it was, went to punch her, but she was that drunk she had forgot she had a glass in her hand.
Oh, jeez.
So she got 18 months in prison. I always remember this. And I thought, that could be anybody.
Mm.
It really could. And she had a nice family, lovely family. I remember speaking to them. It's one of the wee stories that always stick.
Yeah.
In your mind, eh? And it's not all bad people. There are a lot of bad people, let's be honest.
Yeah.
Right? But there are also a lot of people that have just had a bad crack. And I think that's prison, so to be honest.
Yeah.
So I ended up leaving that. I had enough. And I went and worked with children with emotional behaviour problems. So I went for the parents to their children.
Oh, my life. Yeah, but you can try and sculpt the kids, can't you, into...
You can, aye. And, it just shows you but it's about getting them out that environment.
Yes.
That
breaking the cycle.
Absolutely, break the mould, eh? And that's the biggest problem. And I absolutely love that. It's probably one of the most enjoyable jobs I've ever done in my life, without a shadow of a doubt. Was working with the kids. And I absolutely loved it. And then I was doing really well with the piping. And what happened was the gentleman who was Director of Infantry at the time, Lieutenant General Andrew Graham, said, "Look, do you not fancy coming back to the Argylls?" I said, "No, look, I've now been out. I've done a few years in the prison service. I was just getting married. I actually did meet someone that was daft enough to marry me.
Oh.
So I ended up getting married, and I think I just got married, and this was 2006, so I didn't rush into things. And I'd been to a pipe band competition and we'd won all the big major prizes. So he was at me, "Look, would you join back up?" I said, no chance. I said, "Well, what will I need to do?" He says, "Well, because you've done Brecon, because you've done the command courses, you should be fine." So I went, and it was my wife, my new wife, had said, "Why do you not just go back? Look, it's better money. You always talk about it, typical, you always talk about the job, don't you?" It's like, it was rose-tinted glasses. And of course, I went away back, and I remember going down to ITC Catterick, and they didn't want to know me. They're like, "Get yourself away back to the battalion," looked at my courses, looked at everything. I did a few sort of weapon drills with some of my friends who ran me through some stuff. They said, "You've not forgot anything, have you?" I went, "Nah." Did the wee runs that you have to do, and then they said, "Get back to your battalion." The battalion was in Canterbury, part of 16th Air Assault Brigade.
Oh, okay. Point.
And it was, so I went away down there. It was a different army. Couldn't believe it. I was like, I'll be honest, I didn't like it. I thought people were too familiar.
Yeah.
Thought I had missed. They had done Iraq, and they had just came back from Bosnia. And I think they kind of thought, it's that kind of Americanism, they watch the movies and they think, don't think they need to shave. They don't,
Standards.
It was just, they watched that. I actually thought about leaving, I'll be honest, because I was like, this is a different army. And I remember getting taken in by the RSM at the time, saying, "Look, you need to back off the guys. You're being too hard." Because I'd went back in as a corporal.
Corporal, right.
They let me stay the rank. And I said, "Well, I'm not going to change who I am. It's a disciplined service. So, let's get on with it." And I found that quite difficult, going back to that. And I went married unaccompanied because I thought I need to get into it. And I remember it was quite funny. It was a regimental weekend. Just so happens that the weekend I came back. So all my friends, they're talking about 5 or 6 years I was out. They were all, some of them were sergeant majors and stuff, but they wouldn't believe me that I had joined the army again. They thought I was there for the weekend and I was at the wind-up. So, honestly, right? And it came to Monday morning, and I went and seen one of the guys, and I went, "Oh, are you still here, Scotty?" I went, "No, I told you at the weekend, I've genuinely joined back up." And I went,
"Yeah, of course you have."
Good one. And I'm like, "No, I'm being honest." And nobody would believe me, so it was really funny. So I ended up back, and they were going to send me the recruiting team. And I didn't want to go to the recruiting team. I thought, if I'm back, I need to be in with the guys. And we were looking at going to Afghanistan and that was in 2008. So, and our main role was fire support group within that, and 16 Air Assault Brigade. So we were really lucky because it was the best brigade in the British Army by a mile. We got all the kit. You get all the Gucci kit, as they say.
Yeah.
And it was just brilliant. So, we were vehicle based. 50 cows, GMGs, but we were really lucky because we got the new Supercat at the time, Wimix.
Fantastic.
And they had just been declassified because it was only the Hereford guys that had them before. So we were up in Catterick, and we were going about in these vehicles. And because we were 16 Air Assault Brigade, we got to go down to Barnstable and do all the sand dunes down there.
Wow.
We got to go down there and use all the vehicles and stuff, and we got to kind of operate with. So we went with the Pathfinders, and of course some of the Special Forces guys came in and showed us what they do with their vehicles.
Yeah.
And it was absolutely fantastic. I absolutely loved it, and that's where I really fell back in love with the army. I was like, this is why I came back. Actually,
we get the helicopters from 16 Air Assault because we're near Colchester, but we're on the flight path for the Apaches and everything else that goes through to just in Suffolk across the border. But they're a fantastic group of guys and girls there.
It's brilliant, and it was fantastic. I cracked on. We went out to Afghanistan, and we were a summer tour. Right. So we took over from the Royal Marines, and I was in Garmsir. So Prince Harry was there.
Right.
It was the Gurkhas he was with, and it was seen as, at that point, one of the most kinetic environments, if not in the world, certainly in Afghanistan.
Yeah.
So it was quite heavy going, but good. And then the Americans arrived and brought 3,000 US Marines with them. So they were supposed to be there for a couple of weeks, and we were co-located with their recon.
Wow.
And it's amazing, even just the different thinking.
Terminology, vehicles, the whole lot.
And I've got friends to this day, for the Marines, especially because we play the pipes. So we've been out there quite a few times playing the pipes. We were invited out to Camp Lejeune and just see the size of that place. Ending up to 2 hours wait to get in the camp in the morning for work. It's just unbelievable size, unbelievable. And we had a successful tour. At our location, we actually didn't lose anybody. We lost one guy on the whole tour, which is a shame. A great guy, and we had a few injured, but we were quite lucky, and it was just really, really enjoyable. And it was proper. We were going away in our vehicles, and we were right beside the desert as well, and off we'd go away south, and it was just absolutely fantastic. It was just like, I'm not being funny. I know you shouldn't. It was kind of like when you were young, and you watched all those SAS movies type thing.
Yeah.
And I'll say it. I know people say, but that's what it was all about. We had the BBC with us. The BBC came out with us as well, and they did an embedded thing, and it was really enjoyable to let them see kind of what we do.
And I watch those on the television now, and I've got my views around what's happening with the Royals, and I won't go into that. But the fact that Harry was out there serving and did his stuff, that's pretty cool. But accepting it was fun, it wasn't sweetness and light all the time, because you are coming into conflict. You get into theatre with the insurgents, and it's a battle, isn't it? At the end of the day, you are involved in battles. You're worried about roadside bombs, everything else that's going on, and there, for the grace of God, that nobody gets taken.
Well, we actually got put. I had a American EOD team.
Oh, right.
And we ended up having to be their protection, and they were a perceived attitude of that IEDs at the time were not an issue, and our EOD team defused 97 devices.
Incredible.
And it was unreal, and we were in some heavy obviously heavy fighting, especially when we started to push south, and it was unbelievable. But again, it was just, I think sometimes, there are very few times in my military career that I've been so overconfident. And that was one of those times, but it worked out for us. Our company commander was second to none. And that positivity and his sort of military skills and planning and making everybody feel at ease was genuinely so good that when that trickles down, even the youngest jock or the youngest Tom is going, "Yep, I'll do this, no problem." And I think that's a good thing. And it wasn't arrogance. It was just confidence in your own skills.
Yeah,
and do it right, and it worked out for us.
And because if you've got a senior officer who flaps or is grumpy all the time, that it just filters through to the rest of the troops, and it's not healthy.
Well, that's it. I mean, that company commander and point and quite, he was SAS, and he was just a absolute cracking operator,
professional.
And the one thing, and I can compare it to other ones who weren't as good, who were the flappers and useless. And I use that word choicely, I'm not going to lie.
Yeah, no.
Because you can only rate them against the best ones that you've had,
Yeah, exactly right.
We've all had them. But the key I always thought was in the planning, because it was doing the rehearsals properly. It was, deliberate ops. It was, getting everybody feeling at ease. Make sure you've done your rehearsals. Make sure the guys have had plenty of sleep before they go out. And all that sort of things, and just make sure they're comfortable knowing exactly what they're going to do.
Yeah,
they're going to do it, kind of all that good stuff,
Yeah,
and it was brilliant. And I've got to say, I came away for that tour of Afghanistan. It was 2008. I was Heracate, actually, because it never falls in the same sort of year. That's the way it was.
Yeah,
and it was brilliant. And the admiration for the logistics side of things, the admiration for the helicopters, for the Chinook pilots. I mean, we had 3 Dushka teams that was hitting us any time the Chinooks were coming in, and some of the pilots, just the bravest of the brave.
Oh yeah.
Do you mind if we use you as target practice?
Oh,
so that we can catch these guys. Okay, no problem. Right, and you're just like, these are mad. And absolutely phenomenal. And that's when you appreciate all the different elements of the military. When it's all working in tandem and it's going really, going even really badly. Look at the medical side. It was second to none. That was the other side that we all had, and it's well documented. But for the wee soldier in the battlefield, knowing that you've got probably some of the finest medical technicians, whether that be consultants or nurses, and they're going to get you, and they're going to get you back to where you need to be within minutes, then you probably can push yourself a wee bit further.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's what a doctor said to me. I said, how come you've got a really good sort of rate of sort of success and with guys that seem to get on the table, and they seem to be, you're saving quite a lot of people. I said, this is what the doctor said to me. He said, well, think about this though. This isn't a Friday night in Glasgow, right? I'm not getting somebody in here that's could be full of drugs, full of drink. He says, I can literally, you're probably going to be in probably the finest physical, the infantry soldier is going to be in the finest physical condition. So I know, because I know all the calculations, I can pump his body full of every bit of drugs to give him the best chance to survive. And then that way, I know all the calculations. He says, sometimes it'll not work out. Sometimes it does. And a lot of times it does. And it was all things like that, and it's just about building confidence.
And they are brilliant people. I mean, talented doesn't even come into it, does it? They just, the fact that the work that they do when a soldier comes in and they've lost a limb and they've been shot, or they just get on with it, but they think clearly under pressure and deal with the situation they've got in front of them, which gives you the reassurance that, God forbid, if something was to happen, at least you are in safe hands. And the food out there, and I was talking to a fellow about the Army Catering Corps out there, and they did under the conditions, they did a sterling job to keep everybody fed and watered.
The problem we had, though, to be honest, that's one thing that was lacking. Where we were based was we had nothing.
Didn't you?
We had absolutely... we had problems. There were guys losing 3-4 stone a weight because it was stuck. This is 2008. They hadn't changed over the rations yet to sort of warm climate ones, and it was terrible. Guys were losing up to 4 stone in weight.
Wow!
Because you're talking. Because what was happening was obviously you're patrolling. Where we were in Gamsia, I was told it means like hot land or something.
Right.
The actual temperature when you were checking it was like 45, 46. You've got your kit on, £100 a kit comfortably any day of the week, and you just couldn't. What was it? Beef stew and dumplings just doesn't do it in that kind of heat. No. It's just not happening. And so they did start to come in towards the end because they really brought in sort of emergency supplements and stuff, and changed it all. And we had guys coming back that some of their families just broke down, their wives, because you know yourself, it's that weight loss, it becomes skeletal.
Let me tell you, me and weight loss they're very rarely said at the same time.
No, I can obese rather than grotesquely obese, because obviously nobody can see me. But it's like, I've always been. I've never been. I'm a fast runner, right? But I've never been. I've got no neck. I'm 5'6", paint the picture, and I always look like my dad and baldy. I'm the stereotypical look. And I came back. I lost 2 stone.
Wow,
which was bad. But the most extreme ones was a lot of weight, and it was after that tour that they totally revamped the food and all the rest of it. And then we came back from that tour. We then went back in 2010, and it was a Christmas tour, and that was where it was quite a different war altogether. I came back from Afghanistan in 2008, genuinely thinking I'd made a difference to people's lives. In 2010, I went there and I couldn't believe it. It was just all money, corruption. It had changed. The atmospherics had changed unbelievably. We were having to protect ourselves from the Afghan National Army, because they were now based in our patrol bases. I was in the area when the Gurkhas. They lost quite a few guys. There was the Kandak, so the police and the army. These were the guys that had killed the Gurkhas.
Yes.
And there were a few incidents I had. They were stealing stuff, and one guy in particular held up M16 up to me, was going to shoot me in the chest. I wasn't armed, standing in front of him, and the driver of the Hilux that was driving drove away and he fell over. And I'm absolutely adamant that he was going to slot me. And this was the attitude, though, when I went into the ops room. I says, this needs to be reported. They weren't interested at all, because it was about getting out of Afghanistan by that point. The eyes was already getting out.
Yeah.
We'll just train them no matter what. And I felt sorry for the Gurkhas, because I took over from the Gurkhas, and I went down to see the Gurkha guys, and I didn't realise that the Afghan people, they've got the class system and what have you, and they see themselves as somehow a class above the Gurkha people.
Wow.
And it was all that kind of atmosphere, what have you, So that was a bit kind of a strange tour.
How do you feel now, though? Now that we're out and they've gone back to square one. I mean, with the human rights, the way that they're treating the women out there, and all the people that us, the Brits and the Americans lost. That's heartbreaking, if I'm honest with you.
First and foremost, the families of soldiers, airmen, women that have all died. That's absolutely devastating, because it seems now it was worthless.
Yeah.
And then you couple that with the soldiers that have went out there, and I said this to someone before. I feel that I've lied to the people out there, because I was the one that was going out there, given the sound bite, believing what I'm being told, that we're not going to abandon you. Yeah. We'll look after you. We'll help you. We'll help your children get to school. We'll build the schools and the hospitals and what have you. We're not like the Russians. We're different. We're not going to just suddenly one morning get up and run away. And that's exactly
what we did.
What we did. And you know, I think when you think about now the Afghanistan sort of withdrawal, Paras and other regiments, they're fantastic, the guys that went out there. Absolutely. First class. And but I'll always just remember now that iconic picture of someone falling off the aeroplane. You know, that's the ones that come to mind. And then you link that, although I'm too young, you link that with the last helicopter leaving in Vietnam. You know,
I know. Yeah, absolutely right.
And it's disappointing, you know, and I just think, I think it's absolutely terrible. I do understand we needed to leave. But again, if you go back a wee bit, these decisions were made before the people that were in the job at the time. You know, these withdrawal plans were well put in place. So absolutely nothing you can do about it now. And it's a case of just hopefully one day that we learn for kind of mistakes.
Well, you hope so, don't you? So how did you progress? We've left Afghanistan now, but how did you progress with the military?
Well, by that point, I was a sergeant. I was also pipe sergeant, so that double role. I was also fire support group, multiple commander, and I was really lucky because in 2008 I got a step up in Afghanistan, and I became a platoon sergeant. Right, which is quite good when you're doing it for really. So I did that, and then in 2010 I was still sitting as a sergeant, and then the pipe major left, and it's one of those dead man shoes roles, and I got promoted to colour sergeant, or staff sergeant if you're different battalions, and then so sitting as a colour sergeant, became pipe major. Really proud, and then of course the Strategic Defence Review comes out. Is that 2012? 11-12?
At that time.
And they say, 1st Battalion, or as we were then, we came to the Royal Regiment of Scotland in 2006, but they then said that the Argyll and Highlanders would get the chop, would get reduced to an incremental company. So we were sitting in 16 Air Assault Brigade, arguably one of the best battalions in the British Army, doing really, really well. At the end of the day, the Paras are one of the best battalions, 2 battalions, and we were doing every bit as well as them. And it was quite funny actually, because the Paras came down, and the first thing they did a presentation for us and says, any one of you will be welcome. We've worked with these for the last 10 years, get ourselves over. So a few went, let's go, we're out here. And away they went. So it was just a fire sale. That's the best way I can put it. It was terrible.
What a shame.
Sorry?
What a shame, though. I mean, all the history that goes with the regiments, and, you know, Black Watch, your guy, you know, it's just such a shame that this is like when they got rid of the railways in the 1960s, because once you've got rid of it, you can't get it back. And
well, they've still got the Black Watch, and they're all still there.
Yes.
So if you think in 2006, nothing really changed as such. What it did do, truth be told, was it made it easier for senior NCOs and officers to move. But if you're a young soldier, you can't move.
No.
You go where you are. So it suited a few people, but not everybody. And I think the problem is, as well, is when they did the Strategic Defence Review, what they didn't really do was they told everybody that wherever you are, that's where you're going to stay. And then they've slightly changed it a wee bit. So people had went out there, bought houses, done all that sort of stuff, and it just doesn't work if you then go back on your word. And the locations didn't suit a lot of the battalions. No. And we've got a different army now, because let's be honest, that's what we said. Is when I joined back up, it was all about getting away. How can we get away on tours? How can we get away on stuff? No, the young soldier now wants to be posted beside his house. Happy to go and do a tour, but he wants to come back so he can go to mum, get her to do her washing, you know, and it's a different world.
But policing's the same, you know. We look at the issues that we've got within the police service, and those 2 critters that have recently been convicted, and there's going to be more, but they would have got weeded out of the system if there'd have been a proper training regime. We used to go to regional training school, so anybody who wasn't up to it, they got weeded out. You know, but of course now it's all done on computer. There's no face-to-face. They don't do home visits. And dare I say it, we've all become, I say we, I think society, and I'm not woke, and I'm not, I'm not the other side. I sit in the middle. Being nice to people doesn't mean that you're soft, but we've become soft. We've got expectations that everything's going to be served up to us, and life isn't like that. You've got to bloody well work for it.
I think I teach at school now. I do a day and a half, so self-employed.
Yeah.
But I do a day and a half up at a school. A couple of the young teachers came in and were watching me, and I'm teaching 33 young kids.
Brilliant.
From sort of P6, P5, primary 5, so it's different in England, but from 10 years old to 17. So it's quite a broad. And I'm just giving them all the chat, and I'm quite confident. So, I'm quite happy to stand and talk to kids and what have you. And I was teaching them away, and one of the teachers after the lesson, and it was a full hour because it's after school, this particular group. And I just can't believe that you've got 33 kids sitting in there, and you would think they're none. And I was giving them a dressing down. I was like, "No, listen, that's rubbish. That's not good enough." And one of the teachers said to me, "I would never say that to them." I said, "But why not? Praise them when they should be praised.
Yeah.
But give them a dressing down when they need it, because giving them false praise is going to do nothing for them."
Absolutely.
And that's the problem, I think, now, is, do you know what? Regardless of your colour, whether you're a male or a female or whatever you're going to be, I don't mind. But do you know, you've got to be good at the job that you've chosen to do.
Absolutely.
And if you don't meet that requirement, then I'm sorry, you shouldn't get the job.
No, you're absolutely right, and we shouldn't change rules to make people fit into roles. That's ridiculous. So sorry, mate, go on.
So I'll move forward. Sorry, Afghan was done. Strategic Defence Review came in. Some crazy general guy turned up in a helicopter, spoke to the whole battalion, and apologised for disbanding the battalion. All right, thanks. And everyone's laughing though, because the standing joke was, that probably cost him about 25 grand in aviation fuel for him to come from wherever he's been. So he could have probably saved about at least 40 of us.
Yeah.
Right? So that was the standing joke. And so we got reduced to an incremental company. So that was just reduced our company strength and put to Edinburgh. Everybody else just got passed out to whoever. And I was quite lucky. I ended up going to the Army School of Piping and Highland Drumming at Instruer House in Edinburgh, and I got posted there as the pipe major, and that eventually happened in 2013. So I was only there I was responsible for the training of all pipers, potential pipers and drummers, up to sort of intermediate level. So that they sound not too bad, right? So that's it. I didn't really look after the best of them. But it was actually probably the most rewarding, seeing people coming from not being able to do anything to actually playing. And some of them were really, really good and good guys. Because I just treated them like my platoon. I didn't treat it like it was ITC Catterick. That's what it comes under.
Yeah.
But what I always hated about the fact that the piping school comes under ITC Catterick rules is that they're not recruits. And some of these guys have done deployments, all the rest of it, and they tried to treat them like recruits, whereas I actually treated them with a bit of respect and play the game. If come in here, work hard, and then everything will be good. Then what happened was, I was coming near the end of that particular. No, it wasn't. I was only there for about a year and just over a year actually. And I was taken in and asked if I would consider going to London and being the Sovereign's Piper.
Wow.
And I was like, yes. And I'd never wanted it. It's not a job I even ever thought about. And it was just, so I ended up doing it. I went home, pretended to my wife. As we all know though, we've got to lie to our wives, haven't we? Yeah. So I mean this in nice ways, we white lies, not massive. Yeah. Right. So I said to her, look, I've been offered this job in London. It's to be the next Queen's Piper, or the Sovereign's Piper is the proper term. And she said, well, what did you say to him? I said, well, I couldn't possibly say yes until I spoke to you. And of course, I'd already bitten his hand off. I was like, aye, all right. And I said, just to be clear, so I get to go and stay in Buckingham Palace? I went, yep. I was like, whoa, all right. So I still didn't believe it at this point. So I had I'd said to the wife, asked her permission, pretended that I wouldn't take it unless her say so. Went back to work the next day, quite the thing. Came back again and says, oh, that's good. They've said it's a go. And then I wouldn't believe it. And then it was until I got the posting order. And this was February 2015. And on my sort of workflow notifications popped up, posting order, Buckingham Palace. I printed it out, I kept it. I went, that's got to be the best posting ever.
Absolutely.
Buckingham Palace. So really quite nervous, actually. It was quite nerve-wracking. So I'd met the Queen loads of times. And I don't mean somehow the Queen was my friend. I just mean I'd met her playing the pipes for lots and lots of times. And I didn't know what had happened was the Queen came down to visit us in Canterbury. And she came down to visit us in 2013, I think it was, when we got the chop. And that was because the Argyll and Southern Highlanders were very dear to the Queen, because we were given to Her Majesty the Queen as her 18th birthday from the King, from her father.
Wow.
So we were first battalions to be. She was the colonel of the regiment when she was the princess, obviously.
Yeah.
So I think we were either the first or the second. So it was quite a thing. And I always joked to Her Majesty. I actually asked her one day. I said, "Your Majesty, what was it like being given 500 Scotsmen for your 18th birthday?" She burst out laughing, She burst out laughing, and she just wagged her fingers. She went, "Now, pipes. No, that's being cheeky." I was like, aye. And she started laughing, because she liked a wee bit of banter and a bit of cheek, So away I went down to Buckingham Palace. 2015, it ended up about April. I ended up down there. Didn't do very much. Just hung about, seen the incumbent. He just showed me around, and I stayed out the way. But the Queen was phenomenal. The first day I was there, the Queen comes up to me and she says, she said, "Do you know, the only reason you're getting this job is you'll be the first piper in the history that I've never had to look up to." She's walked away from me, right? And this Vice Admiral was standing and says, Do you know have you met Her Majesty the Queen a lot of times? I said, "Well, just not loads of times, sir." He says, "Well, she seems very, very familiar with you, doesn't she?" And what had happened, I was saying there, was Her Majesty came down to visit the battalion in 2013. So I was playing the pipes. I was supposed to play the bagpipes, because that's the tradition round the tables. You play the pipes. But because the Queen wasn't going to be there that long, they said, no, you're not going to do it. We want you to sit at the table. So I had to have lunch with the Queen.
Oh, brilliant.
So I was sitting having lunch with her, and I'll tell you what happened. It was brilliant, right? So you imagine it was like a stack of mashed potatoes, right? And it had a big ball on the top, and it looked like something really inappropriate, right? and she was straight across from me. And I looked down, and I thought to myself, that looks like a man's appendage, right? And I went, I can't look up. I can't look at the Queen right now. So I hit the ball off the top and crushed it all down. And I looked up, and she was doing exactly the same. And she looked at me, and I'm always laughing, So she looked at me and she smiled, and I smiled, and she. And I didn't know, I didn't know where to look.
Oh,
I was like,
fantastic.
Oh, nightmare. So and we were chatting away, and I just came back for the Falklands. Because I knew that we had the chop. I knew that I was going to go. I was going to the piping school, because this was just before I went to the piping school. I thought, I've never been to the Falklands. I thought, right, and my platoon must have hated me, because I volunteered my platoon to go to the Falklands because I'd never been. I was like, well, think about that. Think of the wildlife and it was brilliant. And it just so happens Prince William was down there.
Oh, was he?
He was finishing off his helicopter training, and it was really funny, because he used to come in and he would go in to see one of the chief engineer, and he kept breaking all the helicopters, right? And of course it was this boy. His name was Taff, right? So he's, "Hello, boy, with it was smaller than me, and you fucked the airframe again, you broke it. Argentinians will be coming and you're following all this sort of stuff. And it was absolute class. Right?
Brilliant.
And he was great, and he knew when he was coming in with packets of biscuits, he had broke something else, But I ended up in the pipes quite a lot, round about the Falklands, and I went with Prince William because we did all the sort of wee battlefield bits, and
yes,
and he did a wee service at each one, and we'd clean up some of the memorials, and it was really, really nice. Obviously, we were there as the RIC, the Resident Infantry Company, and I was fire support group, so it was great. 50 cows and all that, great, can't beat it. And I was doing all this, and I got to go up to Ascension Islands.
Oh wow!
Play the pipe up there, and if anybody, I never knew the history of it, and they've got HMS's Hood's old guns up there.
Oh really?
I never knew that, and the Royal Navy went and refurbished them, and the kids can go in and you can literally just take them round.
Wow!
The guns are, and I watched all the the big turtles. Is it a big turtle? Tortoise turtle? And the wee babies were all going into the water, and it was just, what a place. Stunning. Unbelievable. And then fast forward, I'm down at Buckingham Palace. Absolutely fantastic. I've had my dinner with the Queen, and little did I know that was effectively a job interview, and that's how I ended up.
Oh.
It was a wee cheeky, because the Queen liked to see compatibility, because you spend a lot of time with the Queen. I spent as much time with the Queen in a given week as I did my wife. Wow. So she was probably women I've seen probably the most in any given week that I worked there. And I was there for 4.5 years. And everything was going great. I was up in Balmoral Castle, and then my wife wasn't feeling great, so she went to the Queen's doctor. And within 24 hours, my wife was in hospital. Within 36 hours, I was told she had stage 4 terminal cancer that's metastasised, and she's got a couple of weeks to live.
And what's your wife's name?
Morvan. Morvan. It means big hills.
Means a what, sorry?
It means big hills.
Does it?
Aye. Our mum and dad had such a foresight. And she was brilliant. She was my best friend. I'd got married a wee bit older. The two of us had a good life. Full life with 2 children. I've got 2 children. I've got one who's now 16, and that's my daughter. And I've got my son, who is 9. And at the time, Fergus, my son, he was 4.
Right.
And my daughter was 12. So the royal family were fantastic. They just said, go. Don't worry about anything. So they looked after the kids.
Wow.
In Castle, and I was sitting in the hospital, and it was quite hard going, to be honest, because it's just shock, isn't it?
Yeah, sorry, mate.
I think one of the nicest things that I can always remember, I had went and stayed with Morvan overnight, because they didn't know if she was going to make it. So the next day I came back, freshened up, made sure the kids were okay. No worries on that front. And the Queen had, I know it sounds the Queen had went round to the pastry chefs and had got muffins, and she had went down to the garden and got strawberries and all that, and made this lovely little basket up, put a wee note in. And I don't think this, I still, to this day, I don't think the staff believed it was actually from the Queen. Right? So I went in and I said, this is a little basket, and it's from the Queen. And they were like, aye, okay, aye. And it was, and what she had said was, I'm going to give them a little something so they look after Morvan. And I said, that's great. And then all that happened was I came back, and then we went down. She got more biopsies and stuff. And then the consultant says, aye. And it was probably, for me, it was probably the worst moment of my life when the consultant said, that you've not got long. And of course, as a man, I don't know if it's a soldier thing or it's just a disciplined, or it's just, I don't know, it's just your life. I said, well, what do you mean you don't have long? I always remember this kind of stuck with me. And she said, the consultant said, you can't ask that. You're not the patient. It has to be the patient that asks. And Morvan, my wife, said, well, I don't need to be told. And my wife, Morvan's only 42, 43. And I said, well, what do you think? How long do you think you've got? And, I was just sitting there as a third party. And she said, I'm done. I think that's it, I'm going. And he said, you're right. you've got weeks. And I was like, weeks? And then my wife had a good sense of humour, right? But so she was crying at this point, but then, you know what she did? She goes, well, what about chemotherapy? What about something? And he said, well, what you need to remember is, Morvan, you're so ill at this moment, is that chemotherapy is probably going to kill you. He said, but you've just told me I've got 2 weeks left. So what does a week matter? Right? So she goes like that, right, I want chemotherapy. And the consultant got the staff nurse in. The staff nurse said, I can start Morvan. This was a Friday. I can start Morvan next Tuesday. She says, Morvan doesn't have until next Tuesday. So I took her into hospital. I took her into Beatson in Glasgow. And it was like, and I hate to use this comparison, I took her in, and it was honestly like taking. I remember taking when I was younger, I took my dog in to get put down, to get put to sleep. And she collapsed in the corridor, burst out crying, and said, "That's me. I'm not coming out of here."
Oh, mate.
She went in though. They gave her a tiny wee bit of the chemotherapy, and she reacted like that to it. And then what happened was, she got a whole year. That's what she got. Wow. And you know how you hear people, right, talking. I know this isn't the military thing, but this is, as part of it, I suppose. It's like your wife's always there to look after the kids, and you're away in tours and what have you, and all this sort of stuff, and I think that's what done it for me. I was finished in the army the day my wife died. I was done, because she was the driver for me to be able to go and, I think, do well in the army.
Yeah.
That's when my love affair in the army finished, because that was it. I was done. I couldn't do it. So she got a year, and some people sit there and say, and I'm so happy people get to ring that bell and what have you, all that sort of stuff. But I'll be honest, Paul. My wife beat cancer because she lasted a year, and she won. And that will to spend that extra year with your children. Yes. Absolutely phenomenal. And I've never loved my wife as much as what I did in that year. She was fantastic.
Sorry, mate. You'll have loads of people in tears listening to this, because I know how I feel at the moment. But
well, do you know who's one of the best people that helped me? It was the Queen. The Queen was just on a different level.
Really?
So the army wanted me gone. They wanted me removed. Right. No, and they weren't being nasty, right? No. They looked at it from a totally pragmatic point of view of, you need a piper, he's not doing the job, let's get somebody else in to do the job. Simple as that. And the Queen turned and said, no, I've got one piper. He is in Scotland looking after his dying wife. I am not having him replaced. It's not happening. He will come back when he's ready to come back. And that's the end of it. And that kind of, albeit just subtle backup, just meant the world to me.
Yeah, of course.
And I had the equity. I had the lady in waiting coming to the house. I had people on the phone every other day. How's Morvan? How are you? Do you need anything? They were absolutely fantastic. And I must admit, the guards in London, all the GOCs up writing me letters. Are you all right? Do you need anything at all? They were phenomenal. And that was the thing in the equity. My wife is actually, as the crow flies here, my wife's about 50, 70 steps from where I'm sitting talking to you right now. Oh,
really?
So she can keep her eye on me. That's what she said. So she said that. She said, when I die, she says, put me in one of those tubes for renovating a house. She said, then just, because the church is right next door to my house. Right. So she said, fire me in one of them and just put me right in the ground, and that'll be fine. So, but she's, aye. And the equity came up to the funeral, and this is quite a funny wee story. So the equity comes in, and typical Scottish funeral, everybody was totally steaming.
Oh, were they? Been on the whiskey.
So the equerry's standing there. His nickname's TA, right? And he's away now. He's away back to his regiment, but he was standing. He's a soldier, and he's drinking. He was like, I can't drink too much, because the Duke of Edinburgh, the late Duke of Edinburgh, God rest his soul, he's he was waiting for a report on the funeral.
Oh,
so TA's on the half, getting the drink fired, and I think it was pints actually, maybe no whiskey, because I think so. He had about 5 pints, right, and everyone's of course buying him drink. You know what hospitality is like. Yeah. Keep drinking it. So he got a lift and away he went to the airport. So he tells me, I got on the aeroplane. He said, and of course, you feel more drunk, don't you? Because you've been drinking it, and he had nothing to eat. So he says, I got down there. So what I did was I had a drink on the plane because I thought I better just keep this going. So he says, I got in and he was going to have dinner with Her Majesty the Queen and the Duke of Edinburgh, and they were pre-dinner drinks. And the Duke's like, excuse the language, he says, are you fucking drunk? He said, yes, I am, Your Royal Highness. He says, but they wouldn't stop giving me drink. And I couldn't say no. He says, hey, that's the bloody Scottish for you, isn't it? Wasn't it a good funeral? He went, I've never seen anything like it. He was like, brilliant, aren't they? He says, they're crazy. And then they told them all about it, and just said, it was sad, blah, blah, blah. But it was nice. And they were always helpful and just great people. And I went back I did go back for a wee while, because Morvan her health had improved, and I went back down for a few months, and then but I knew that was it. I was just really going down to say cheerio to people, and then I came home, and I got sort of a year, 6 months off for the army, and then they just said, right, what do you want to do? I said, I can't go back. I'm done. I'm finished. And I was looking at my commission to be a captain, but and I'd done the paperwork, started all that sort of stuff. That was looking good, because it's always handy when your boss is the Queen.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah,
it does you right up, And then what happened there was, sadly, I didn't take that, but it was the right thing to do, Paul. I had 2 young children.
Yeah,
decided to retire, and I did go to the reserves for a wee while, but I just didn't. It was still the army, so I didn't want anything to do with it. I left that, and I decided to start my own business, teaching bagpipes online and in person, but majority online. And I do that now. I've got all the time for my children, which is the key thing, because I'm mum and dad now.
Yeah.
And I just kind of wish. I think someone asked me what would you want to say to Morvan now. I think the main thing I'd want to say to her is just, I wish Morvan knew the Scott now. Yeah. Because I think until I went through that, especially at the end, maybe I'm just older. Not wiser, but certainly older. And I just think that, I think I'm a better person now. I think it's a good thing to people say. And I've got two wonderful children who are great. My son's rugby daft, loves it, can't get enough. My daughter, she went for Scotland rugby trials last weekend.
Brilliant.
She likes her hockey. She's going to university in the summer, which is phenomenal. So I think I'm not doing too bad. And I've no. It's about getting on with your life, and I'm. People are saying, mate, somebody else or what have you. I'm here for my children.
Yeah.
That's got to be my focus. I had all the love for my wife that I needed, and I'm not saying I'll never meet somebody, but at this point, I just feel time isn't a healer. That's a lot of rubbish. It's just, I'm happy I've had Morvan. We were only married for 13 years, but what a 13 years it was. She was mental. But that's it, and now I'm in a wee place called Thornhill, just outside Stirling. Teach the pipes to people, next generation. Brilliant. Hopefully inspire some wee young people that you didn't have to be a brain scientist. I mean, who would ever thought? When I was 15 years and 9 months and I walked into Port Street in Glasgow, Stirling, I walked in the Army Careers Office and held my hand up, my right hand up, and swore allegiance to Her Majesty Queen Elizabeth II. Who would ever have thought that go forward 25 years, I would be sleeping 75 steps away from the Queen. I would be flying with her in a private jet all over the country. She would know who it was, knows my kids, Absolutely fantastic.
What was her favourite? Because, I mean, we absolutely adored the Queen. Absolutely adored her. And our mutual friend, Mac McIntyre, invited us to a party there and a kids' Christmas party. And she walked past us. I mean, we were just in total awe. In total awe. But what was her favourite piping? What was her? Did she have a favourite tune, or did you have to?
She did. Well, she told me a couple of her favourite tunes, and what she did say to me, Paul, was never tell anybody.
Oh no, that's fine. That's fine.
No. I mean, no, it doesn't. It's not about matter now. But she said at the time, she says, "Don't tell anybody your piper friends." She says, because all that's going to happen is every place I go, that will end up playing. Right. So I'll tell you a funny story before I tell you a favourite tune. So she was sitting, and it was a breakfast, and Brian McRae was the Queen's piper, or Sovereign's piper, from 1980 to 1996, and he liked the drinks, right? So on this occasion, he was in the bar, and he had fell asleep in the bar. So they went and got him at 10 to 9. And he was still in his uniform from the night before. So they got him. He was that drunk. They put him out in the garden, and he stood and he played Scotland the Brave for 15 minutes. The Queen turned around and said, "I never want to hear that tune again." Right, and they literally had to run out and pull him back in because he was that drunk. Right. And it was like if they'd done a Carry On film, probably the royal family, it would be a Carry On Royals. It would be hilarious.
Brilliant.
And it was so funny, seemingly, right? But one of our favourite tunes was the Queen Elizabeth March, because I think a few people had mistakenly, when she was younger, got it mixed up with being the tune written for her, but it was actually written for Queen Elizabeth, the Queen Mother.
Right.
And but she always said to me that she was so fond of that tune because it brought back so many happy memories from when she was younger, and that was probably one of her favourites. But she did like a little jig, a jig and a hornpipe, something that got the toes tapping and the fingers moving, and a wee sort of party tunes. And she was very knowledgeable. And I've said this before, but I don't mind saying it again. I do genuinely think that she's arguably one of the greatest women. Well, she is the greatest woman
of our life
out there.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because her knowledge of people was unbelievable. I mean, I would finish a day, Paul, and I would go and get my shoes off, get my brogues off, feet absolute killing me. And I'm thinking, I'm 44. How? She's 86, 87, 90. I'm like, this is unreal. And what a memory. Unbelievable. Just could remember everything. Just people. Oh, I met his father in 1981.
Yeah.
She said that to me one time, and it was really funny. I remember standing, Paul, and she was walking through, and the Queen's walking through. She turns to me and says, chin to chest, put my head down, bow. I said, good afternoon, Your Royal Highness. She just looked at me, raised eyebrows, and I went, oh, I do apologise. Good afternoon, Your Majesty. And she grabbed me by the arm and she said, Pipes, been 67 years since anybody's called me Your Royal Highness. I says, well, I do apologise, Your Majesty. She went, oh, no, who knew? I loved it. And we walked on, and she was just brilliant.
Yeah.
She's somebody that you wanted to work for. That's it. That's it. Just a wonderful woman.
Yeah, absolutely brilliant. And her passing in September the 8th, we were in Australia, and we'd had the heads up from a couple of friends, and very sad day. But you know what? Her legacy will go on and on forever.
Do you know? I was in Italy. I was over at NATO headquarters in Napoli, and I came back, and my daughter phoned me and said the Queen's died, and she was bawling her eyes out. I said, what's wrong, pal? She went, the last person that ever actually cared about us as a family has just died.
Oh.
And that's really nice that you can see it that way.
Yeah.
And this was devastating. Actually, my son Fergus was actually more upset with the Duke of Edinburgh dying.
Yeah.
He used to run down and they would feed the red squirrels up in Balmoral. So he'd go up for the wee cob nuts and go down and try and find them, because the Duke of Edinburgh was obsessed with red squirrels. Loved them. Because I think he liked shooting the grey ones. I think there's more to do with that. But because the red ones obviously are ours. And he absolutely loved it. He used to love going trying to find them.
Brilliant.
Great. But That's it. That's my wee story.
Well, before I'd give everybody the opportunity, but before we conclude this interview, have you got anything you'd like to add, alter, change, correct?
Yeah.
You've been a star, sir.
No, pleasure to meet you.
And when
nobody falls asleep halfway through the interview.
Well, I'm sure they'll be captivated. When you're next down here, please give us a heads up, and I'll grab hold of Mac and we'll go and have a beer.
Perfect.
Or two. And I wish you and your family every success. Now, what I am going to do is I'm going to put all your links into the body of this podcast so that anybody who's listening to it, if they want to do the piping, if they want to learn how to pipe, whatever, or learn all about you, but just tell us, what is your website? What's your website called?
The website's www.militarypiping.com. Quite easy to remember. And online lessons. If you live nearby, you can do it in person. And that's it. And that's what I do. That's how I look after my family.
Good man. Well, look, we'll get that out there, and I wish you every success for the future.
Thanks very much, Paul. And just a wee point to note, I've never known Mac to ever buy a pint.
Brilliant. Take care of yourself. Take care of those lovely kids as well, mate.
All the best, buddy.
God bless you. Cheers.
Bye. All the best. Cheers.
Bye-bye.